We talk about a very intriguing offseason for the LA Kings with Russell Morgan of Hockey Royalty on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we are on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. Also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We are happy to be joined once again by friend of the show, Russell Morgan from Hockey Royalty, to talk all things LA Kings. Of course, he covers the LA Kings, podcast host, and you can check out all of his stuff over there at hockeyroyalty.com. Hey, Russell, how you doing?
Eddie, what's up, man? Thanks for having me on.
Are you like my wife? Are you waiting with bated breath for the Chargers schedule release that's coming up later on today?
I knew that was coming. I am. I mean, for those who don't know, the Chargers, their social media team does a great job with their schedule releases. I think they've done, or they did anime kind of theme last year. So I'm looking forward to what they have in store for us this year.
Yeah, my wife, as some may know, is a huge Chargers fan. Russell's a Chargers fan as well. And we're actually planning a trip to Pittsburgh to see her Chargers play my Steelers, which we have done every time. I think the last 8 times they've played each other, we've gone to that game. Obviously, we're season ticket holders for the Chargers, but that's our vacation. Yes, I have a wife that plans vacations around football games, so it's a tough life. Yeah, it's a tough life for a sports fan like me. So
hopefully it's as good as your New York trip that you had.
Yeah, well, see, the Chargers won that game. I don't want them to win this one.
That's right. You're a big Steeler guy.
But that was a good trip, though. But let's get to the LA Kings, obviously, which is why you're here and why people are watching this show. And Russell, you get out to just about everything. I am impressed with the way you're able to get out there and talk to the players, talk to the coaches, be at practices. And you were out there for the Rob Blake, Luc Robitaille press conference last Monday. You got to ask a couple of questions as well. What, I guess, kind of stood out for you from the press conference, particularly with Rob Blake, obviously talking to the media? Luc was there as well, kind of just he didn't have much to say, but what was your takeaway from that press conference?
To be honest with you, just a little disappointed. Can't be around the bush. I mean, we're looking for something different. I mean, when you lose the way you have the last 3 seasons the same way to the same team, and it seems like things are getting worse, and you pitch progress to the fan base and the media, sorry, that's not going to fly. I mean, we're looking for actual progress here, and that means winning games and winning playoff series, and that hasn't happened. So, I guess it was pretty surprising to see that it was actually Rob Blake that was going to make that end of that, or was actually going to go through with that end of this season interview process. I mean, that was pretty much an announcement that he was going to end up coming back as a general manager next year. So I'm going in there thinking like, okay, well, he's going to announce like we're going to overall system changes. We're going to overhaul management, scouting, everything to try to figure out a way to turn things around. And it was, hey, we're just going to run things back, as what it seemed. I mean, Luc Robitaille got up there and pitched how everybody's a family, and at the end of the day, we're gonna have this big Christmas party. And then it was just like, man, what are you talking about? Like, that's like the last thing fans want to hear. You have an angry fan base right now that wants to get change, and that changes. And once that change isn't happening, they're expecting at least some sort of some sort of movement to take place. And they didn't get that. And they got a management team that thinks they're what Luc Robitaille said, they're close, which that doesn't seem – they seem even further from where they were 2 years ago. So when you start pitching things like that to a fan base that's pretty angry, you're going to get an angry response. And I think that it's quite warranted.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear them say we're making progress, except in the playoffs. Like, well, is that really progress when you're not doing it? And then when they preach to us, right, at the beginning of the year, we got to take the next step, more is expected. And then it doesn't happen, and then nothing happens. There was no consequences to that, no accountability. We know Todd McClellan was dismissed. How surprised are you, though, that Rob Blake is still the general manager?
I'm very surprised. And I guess I probably shouldn't be, seeing how the way this team's been managed and organization the last few years. I mean, I don't want to say it's a good old boys club, but that's certainly what it feels like. And especially at this point, you look at any other organization across the league and any sports league, really, to have a management team kind of go through what this team has gone through the last few years and to make as big as moves as this team has had, to pretty much put themselves in the situation they have where they have no flexibility all year. They had a player in Pierre-Luc Dubois who was a big acquisition that had the worst year of his career and pretty much became a laughingstock across the NHL for that acquisition, where when the players are going the other way seem to be having pretty decent years themselves. So when all that happens, to not go through a change, and not just a head coach, but in terms of general manager, president of operations, anything, that's going to draw a lot of scrutiny. And it's like I said, it's all warranted. It's all to be expected at this point.
So we did see the coaching change during the season. So that did change. But now that we're at the end of the season, the question is who's going to be the next head coach going forward? And it seems to me, and I have nothing against Jim Hiller. I think he came in and did a good job for what he was asked to do. But it seems to me it's his job if he wants it almost. And I don't even know if they're talking to anyone else. I've seen Craig Berube, you and I have talked about, would I think be a perfect coach to come in here, kick some butts, and he's won a Stanley Cup. He's visited Toronto, Winnipeg, New Jersey, Ottawa. I don't even know if they're talking to him or if they're planning on talking to him. Are they looking at anybody outside the organization, or is it just basically, well, Jim Hiller did a good job. Let's see what he can do as the head coach full time and go through training camp?
Yeah, I mean, the Kings, I mean, I'll give them credit. They've always been tight-lipped about anything that goes on, whether it be contract negotiations, coaching interviews, anything that happens. Like, there's never any leaks. I know Elliot Friedman on his podcast even said he hasn't really heard much besides Jim Hiller's name. And the way that, I mean, judging just based off of the way that Rob Blake talks about Hiller at the end of season media availability, it would certainly seem like Hiller is the front runner for the job. But I mean, you have to look at it like this, though. I mean, if the expectations are now like, well, we all hope that if things don't turn around after this season, then okay, has to be some sort of change, at least in general manager position. I mean, what head coach is going to sign up for that 1 year to kind of try to turn things around? At least a big name head coach, in fact. So, I mean, if fans are looking for a Berube or any sort of Evanson, I know his name's out there too. If any of those big names, I don't see a coach like that with that notoriety to want to come in and take on that risk. So, I mean, yeah, like you said at the beginning, it's like Jim Hiller, I thought, did a pretty good job. He was he played with the cards that he was dealt. It's a team that it runs a certain system that seems like management wants them to run and has built the team to run it. So he had to try to do what he could, like Rob Blake said at the midseason availability, to get some wins. It was going to be based off wins and losses, and he did his job. He got the team to the postseason. It's just they faltered at the end. So I think what we're all looking for is if Jim Hiller is indeed going to be the guy, let him be the actual head coach. Don't puppet him around and kind of make your own decisions as far as personnel or roster or even the system change. I know Jim Hiller is a very, very progressive head coach. I mean, this is a guy who ran his own analytics company before he was in the coaching environment. So if that's going to be the case where Hiller comes in, I'd love to see Hiller put his own hands on this team and try things new. I mean, just listening from the players when they had their exit interviews, I mean, Kevin Fiala and Adrian Kempe specifically, they were looking at changing things up and they wanted to try new things, play a little bit more fun and aggressive, let their skills shine through. So if that's the case, listen to your players. Let them dictate the way they want to play and let their strengths show. And that hasn't been the case the last few years. So if Hiller's the guy, I want him to have a little bit more of a voice in the room.
Well, speaking of the players, we're going to talk specifically about players coming up, including Pierre-Luc Dubois. We also have some breaking news today regarding a Kings player. We'll do that more with Russell Morgan here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It saves you time and money so you can provide for your family with a financial safety net starting today. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million in coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Life insurance may not be something you're thinking about, but you should, because you never know what can happen in life, and you need to be ready and responsible. Policygenius helps you compare your options from top companies with their team of licensed experts. They're on hand to help you talk you through it. Your work life insurance policies may not offer enough protection for your family's needs. Even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job. Policygenius offers unbiased advice from a licensed expert support team. They have no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. They have thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit for their needs. Life insurance needs to be checked off your list, and you can do it in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL. We continue with Russell Morgan from Hockey Royalty talking about the LA Kings, and let's get into it. Pierre-Luc Dubois. Obviously, it was a failure this year. He did not play well. Although I do want to ask you, what did you think? Did you anticipate how he would be used when he came to the LA Kings, and how much he would contribute in his first season?
I anticipated them to use him the way he's been used, as a top 6 offensive player, and not necessarily a middle wing centerman who's gonna be deployed in a shutdown role. I mean, I know, like, it's hard to say because, yeah, like if you're a star centerman or even just a offensive centerman, you should be able to produce in any role that you're given, right? I mean, they're having look at Phil Deneau. He came in and he was put in a position, and he's just always going to be the same Phil Deneau that we expect him to be. But I think with PL, he came in, and I mean, you could say what you will about the wingers he had at his disposal most of the season. Alex Laferriere, I'm a big Laferriere guy, but he's a rookie in the NHL, first year pro. Carl Grunstrom at times. But it's weird though, because like when he played with players like Kevin Fiala or Quentin Byfield or even Arthur Kaliev, he seemed to be playing pretty well. But I mean, as far as his actual utilization the entire year, it seemed to be quite confusing because you're bringing in a guy who played the number one center role for Winnipeg last year, playing with players like Kyle Connor, 40 goal scorer, Nikolai Ehlers, high offensive producer, and now you bring him over here and you kind of put him with more or less fringe NHLers throughout the entire season. That those expectations are going to be aren't going to be met because you're looking for point production at that point, especially for a big acquisition like he is. So once that didn't happen, then a lot of the fan base kind of lost a lot of confidence in PL, and I think a little bit of that had to do with his effort that was kind of shown and displayed on the ice. Where, I mean, maybe it's a player that got a little frustrated, but even then, like, that's no excuse, especially when he's being paid the amount he's being paid. So it's I was a little confused by his deployment throughout the entire year, especially I guess on the power play as well, because he seemed like he wasn't given any opportunity, at least in front of the net, where he's excelled throughout his career. So if that's going to be the case where you're looking for a player like PL to upgrade his game or be the player that you're expecting him to be when you traded for him, then things got to change as far as his deployment next year.
I know the buyout thing has been brought up a lot from people and even a lot of pundits around the NHL. And Rob Blake emphatically said, no, they're not doing that. Now, he could be not telling the truth. Maybe he changes his mind. And we talked about on our show on Tuesday about some of the interesting kind of wrinkles to buying him out before he turns 26, when his birthday falls, as far as when the NHL season ends and all that kind of stuff. But what are your general thoughts on a buyout for Pierre-Luc Dubois? Do you think that is something the Kings should seriously consider?
I was never on board with a buyout. I mean, to be honest, too, I'd much rather deal with PL for the next 7 years at his cap hit of $8.5 million than have to have a cap hit of close to 1.9, close to $2 million for 14 years. That's a hefty price to pay. I know that I've always been kind of bullish on what the player, what type of player he can be in this team, and if you give him the opportunity to be that player. So, like I said, like if they give him a better chance to be the PL Dubois he's been in the past. I mean, because look at it, this is a player that has eclipsed at least 60 points in his career. He's been that. That's should be the floor for him coming over. So to have only, what was it, 40, 45 points, 50 points this season, I mean, that's not good enough. You have to be better in that aspect. So, but as far as a buyout, I just didn't really see it being an option, especially if, like I said, with Rob Blake being announced to be the GM next season, buyout was definitely not going to be on the table after that.
How do you feel about Kings ownership? I know that, some people feel like, the ownership group of this team don't really care, but I mean, this is a team that spends to the cap. They paid Todd McClellan $5 million a year, which if that's not the top paid coach, it's one of the top paid coaches in the league. So, I mean, money talks as far as spending, but I knew I get like, look, when I started watching the Kings, Bruce McDowell was the owner, and you've seen in other sports, maybe Steve Ballmer with the Clippers. He's courtside. He's there. You see he's invested in it. You never see that with the Kings. They're kind of a faceless like ownership group in some sense. But it always seems like I've always heard they treat their people well and they do spend. What do you think? What do you think about the ownership of the Kings? Are they and is invested in this team as we want them to be?
Yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons to it, right? I mean, you have those really high voices owners across the sports landscape. Mark Cuban comes to mind as one who's guys always like Steve Ballmer, like you mentioned, is more on basketball. But I mean, even hockey, there's some. I mean, the new Ottawa Senators owner who came out and he had his press conferences throughout the season when they were going through their issues. But
the new Utah owner is very upfront, a young guy, kind of energetic. He's out there.
Yeah. Which is good because especially for them, like you want to like get the fan base kind of riled up over there. So he's doing a great job. But as far as the Kings, like, you mentioned they're throwing all the money that can be thrown on this team. I mean, they're spending to the salary cap. Todd McClellan was the highest paid coach in the NHL in his time here. But then you also have to think, like, is that an ownership group that say, here, take whatever money you want and make the decisions you want? And that's, they don't really care as long as the revenue is coming in and the profits are being made. So, I mean, yeah, you can only throw in so much money, but there's got to be a product on the ice that's going to show for it. So I'd like to see a little bit more involvement as far as that, where like maybe AEG comes out and says maybe things aren't good enough and they're looking for more. But if that's going to be the case, then you're kind of, everybody's looking back at the general manager position and the president of hockey operations, who's Luc Robitaille. So if those two are going to keep coming around, then where's this money? What's the result of all this money that you're throwing at this team? I mean, because we're not seeing it on the ice. So I don't know. It's kind of give and take at that point. I'm not really I don't really have a big opinion as far as ownership, but as far as the hockey management, then that's where things need to change a little bit.
All right, we're going to get more into possible roster changes for the LA Kings. We'll do that with Russell Morgan here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. It is playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. Unfortunately, we can't bet on the Kings, Lakers, or Clippers to win, but we can bet against the teams that eliminated them, against the Oilers and the Nuggets and the Mavericks who beat our team. So, and also there's the Dodgers, first place, and looking to win it all this year. It is a great time to be a sports fan, and it can be even more fun by winning with FanDuel. You can bet on who you think will win or lose, or things like how many home runs Shohei Ohtani will hit this year. You can do it all with FanDuel. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, wrapping it up with Russell Morgan of Hockey Royalty, but still a lot of things to talk about as far as players that will be back or maybe won't be back next year. We do have some breaking news today involving the LA Kings. Obviously, the goaltending position could see a lot of turnover. You had all three goalies, Phoenix Copley, David Rittich, and Cam Talbot, all UFAs. Well, scratch David Rittich off that list. He has signed a 1 year, I believe it was a $1 million deal to remain with the LA Kings next season, as you would expect to be the backup. I know you had retweeted it on social media, a picture of Phoenix Copley, he put a picture out of him with the skates on. So he's getting back from his rehabilitation from his knee injury. So we'll see how that goes with him. Maybe returning as, I don't know, an option in the AHL. Who knows? But as far as the goaltending position, what do you think? I know Cam Talbot would love to come back. We've talked about the Kings running it back again. Hard to believe that if they're going to make some changes, maybe they wouldn't look to do it in the goaltending position. What do you think about goaltending next year?
Yeah, I mean, goaltending was great. I mean, the biggest question, I guess, for this team coming into the season was the goaltending position, and that was pretty much answered throughout the entire year. Cam Talbot was an all-star, even though he had his middle-of-the-season struggles. David Rittich was both top 3 in both goals against average and save percentage for all goalies with at least 20 starts. So to get that goaltending at the value that you had, what Talbot was $1.5 million for 1 year, and Rittich was, I think, $875,000 last season. So now you have Rittich coming back at only a $1 million cap hit. I think that's incredibly great value. I mean, I would have expected Rittich to maybe bank off of this pretty solid season that he had and maybe try to up that a little bit, maybe $1.5, $2 million, couple-year deal here and there. But to only get Rittich at a 1-year deal at only $1 million, man, that's a really, really good backup option to have. I mean, you can even have him be the Ontario Reign starting goalie next year, or one of the Reign goalies next year. I know with Portillo there, he's been really good. But, I mean, as a third goalie at only $1 million, or even a backup goalie at only $1 million at the production rate he had this past season, I mean, that's really solid. The only thing is that if we're all looking for the system to change and maybe play a little bit more of this high-tempo offensive style game, you might have to rely on your goaltenders a little bit more, because the Kings have always been a really defensive first team. So if that's going to be the case, then maybe Rittich is kind of leaned on a little bit. But, I mean, with his stats the way they are and the way he played, I think it's a really solid signing for LA.
A couple other big-name UFAs, Victor Arvidsson at the forward position and Matt Roy defensively. I think they're both not coming back. What are your thoughts on Victor Arvidsson and Matt Roy?
Yeah, as far as Matt Roy, I'd be very surprised if he came back. I mean, go get your money, man.
Yep.
That's all I'll say. I mean, he's 28, 29 years old. He just had a kid. Especially where the Kings are now. You have Jordan Spence, who had a really solid first full season with the Kings. Brant Clark, we all know how good he's going to be and how good he was in his short time with LA. And shout out to the Calder Cup, or the Ontario Reign going through the Calder Cup playoffs with Brant Clark on there too. So yeah, with Matt Roy coming back, that just doesn't seem feasible. And especially with the Kings' kind of reluctancy to transition one of the right shots to the left shot too, or to the left side, I don't see that happening. As far as Victor Arvidsson, I wouldn't be surprised if he did come back, to be honest with you. And the only reason I say that is because you kind of look at Victor's season. There's a lot of injuries and a lot of kind of question marks with his reliability and his ability to kind of play a full year at this point. The last few years, definitely in and out of the lineup the last 2 seasons, especially with LA. So if he's looking to really bank on a long-term or really high-end deal, I don't see a team offering them that. So maybe if you're LA, maybe offer him a 1-year deal at maybe $3.5, $4 million to kind of a prove-it deal for him so he can come back and showcase himself a little bit more. And then you kind of bank on or really try to cash in on maybe a longer-term deal with a little bit more money involved there. So if that's the case, I can see the Kings kind of they still have a little bit of wiggle room as far as forwards up front, especially if you let Matt Roy walk. Victor Arvidsson, obviously, free agent. So if there's that money available, then, hey, bring back RV on a 1-year deal. He's proven to be a really good player for the Kings when he is healthy. So if that's the case, then, yeah, try to do what you can to get him on a short-term deal with a low cap hit.
Let's talk about a couple of the restricted free agents. Blake Lizotte is a guy who it's hard not to like, obviously. He gives you everything he's got all the time, but he is undersized. Sometimes he does get pushed around. I think, maybe they have an option. I know Rob Blake in his press conference talked about some of the younger guys coming in and playing a more expanded role. Maybe it's time to make room for Alex Turcotte as that fourth line center, perhaps, and come in and part ways with Blake Lizotte. But I know he's very popular and the coaches seem to love him. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, you said it best. Great guy, high energy. I mean, he's never going to leave you wanting more. The thing is, though, it's like, yeah, you got those young players coming up, Turcotte, Thomas. They need playing time. And if Blake Lizotte is going to be the fourth line center again for this team, especially with you already have three centers in front of him, kind of leaves one of those young players out. So as much as I love what Blake Lizotte has done, and he's come in and proven himself to be an NHL player, especially for his size, I think it would be best for the organization to probably find or have him go elsewhere, really. I mean, you got to try to open up a spot for one of these young players and give them a full-time role at this point, because as much as all the great things that Lizotte's done for this organization, it's time to move on.
And finally, he's only 22, Arthur Kaliev. It seems like he doesn't want to be here anymore. I don't know if Jim Hiller sticking around can convince him maybe to stay. I don't know what they're going to do with Arthur Kaliev. I could see him going somewhere else and getting the perfect opportunity for him and turning into a really good player. I'm so confused with the way he was handled this year. Your thoughts on Arthur Kaliev's future?
Man, I'm just so disappointed, to be honest with you, with Kaliev. Not with Kaliev, but the way they've used Kaliev this entire year. And then, like I said earlier, they've been so tight-lipped about everything that goes on. And this seems to be another one of those stories where we just don't know what happened with Kaliev. And when we asked Rob Blake what the future holds, he just says, "Oh, we just have to figure something out." And he wasn't able to help us out during the end of the season. So it's like, well, yeah, he wasn't able to help you out because you just never played him. So and then for Rob Blake to give that answer as far as Kaliev coming back as the King next year, it's like, well, he's a restricted free agent, so you have team control. So there shouldn't be any question mark as to whether he's going to come back next season. So that answer in itself just made it seem like, okay, Artie's played his last game as the King. And it's just so disappointing because you've seen flashes. You can't teach the shot that Arthur Kaliev has. And when he has that skill set, I mean, like we've talked about, like this has been an organization that seems to just kind of hinder their top end players from utilizing the skills that they have. They almost like, it's like you have one player who's really good at one thing, but it's like, okay, well, we're going to kind of bring that down a bit and make you really good at, make you good at everything else instead of kind of emphasizing that one thing that you're really good at. And that's same thing with Kaliev. It's like they've tried to turn him into this kind of two-way player where he's going to be this offensive player. That's just who he is. You need to set him up to be that in the NHL, and they never really gave him the opportunity, especially on the power play. When your power play is struggling, you have this player where he has the shot, probably one of the best shots on the team, if not one of the best shots in the NHL that he's shown time and time again, and yet you leave him in the press box, and now your power play is struggling. So, I mean, as far as like, I would just love to see a way where Kaliev comes back and kind of proves himself a little bit. But I would also I wouldn't mind seeing him go somewhere else and prove himself somewhere else, and kind of give a little bit of a middle finger to the management group and say, hey, look what this team's giving me the opportunity to do, and I'm proving to myself for it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people could envision that actually happening. We'll see. That's Russell Morgan. He's from Hockey Royalty, hockeyroyalty.com. Check out the podcast. You can follow him on X, Twitter, at NHL Russell. Russell, always a pleasure. Always good to talk hockey with you. I'm sure we'll do it again at some point this offseason, but always appreciate your time. And thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Eddie. Appreciate it.
All right. That is Russell Morgan. And again, we always appreciate him joining us on the show. For you, thank you for joining us on the show, you everydayers. Those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day. We will be talking on tomorrow's show a little bit about the Ontario Reign in the Calder Cup playoffs as they continue their quest to stay undefeated and try and get that Calder trophy as they take on the Coachella Valley Firebirds. Also update you on what's going on at the World Championships with the LA Kings and anything else, any other news we have talking about the LA Kings. And then on Friday, of course, we have our fan feedback show. You have your thoughts on anything we talked about on this show, Rob Blake, who's going to be the head coach, the player's future. We'd love to get your feedback. It's the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. And you can always leave your comments in the YouTube section, helping the algorithm and for people to help find the show by doing that. And stay interactive with us on social media. You can follow us on X, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you as always for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings go.